praktek dan praktek yang kita lakukan ini adalah dan ada juga kondisi sekarang. Iya, benar-benar kopi. Nah, di sini kami tidak hanya melakukan teori, tapi ada juga praktek.
Dunia terus berubah dan juga beriringan dengan semua kebutuhan di dalamnya. Di dalam kehidupan manusia sehari-hari, sumber energi menjadikan hal yang utama bagi keberlangsungan hidup manusia hingga diperlukannya sumber energi terbarukan. PPSDM KEBTKE hadir untuk memenuhi semua tantangan-tantangan yang ada di masa sekarang ini. Di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan, serta konservasinya agar bidang KEBTKE dapat dikelola secara baik. Mengelola sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan menjadi fokus utama bagi PPSDM KEBTKE untuk menjadikannya SDM yang berkompeten, profesional, berdaya saing, dan juga bermoral dalam lingkungan global di bidang ketenagalistrikan atau energi baru terbarukan dan konservasi energi. Dengan program-program unggulan yang diterapkan PPSDM KEBTKE dan juga didukung oleh para pegawai yang profesional dan berdedikasi tinggi. Demi melengkapi kesempurnaan pembentukan sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan. Demi menciptakan dan membentuk SDM yang kompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi. PPSDM KEBTKE memfasilitasi seluruh peserta didik dengan sarana dan prasarana yang sudah memiliki standar ISO. Laboratorium dan workshop menjadi fokus sarana dan prasarana di wilayah Pusdikat KEBTKE.
PPSDM KEBTKE, Kementerian Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral, telah bertransformasi menjadi sebuah lembaga pengembangan SDM di bidang ketenagalistrikan dan EBTKE yang unggul dan selalu menjaga kualitas layanannya. PPSDM KEBTKE mendukung target nasional Net Zero Emission 2060 melalui transisi energi yang harus diwujudkan oleh semua pihak untuk mengurangi dampak perubahan iklim bagi kehidupan masyarakat. Selain itu, Indonesia memiliki energi baru terbarukan dengan potensi yang tinggi, mulai dari matahari, hidro atau air, angin, bioenergi, panas bumi, serta lautan. Hal inilah yang membuat kami semakin matang dan siap melayani Anda. Kami didukung oleh para fasilitator yang berkompeten dan fasilitas yang lengkap sesuai dengan kebutuhan pelatihan, sertifikasi, bimbingan teknis, dan layanan penunjang lainnya. Pelatihan dan sertifikasi dilaksanakan dengan layanan yang prima. Bergabunglah bersama PPSDM KEBTKE.
Program diklat di dalamnya dibagi menjadi 4 kelompok besar, yaitu bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, konservasi energi, serta manajemen. Bidang ketenagalistrikan terdapat beberapa diklat unggulan yang mencakup diklat teknis inspektur ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perencanaan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perizinan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis uji layak instalasi listrik, diklat teknis perhitungan tarif listrik, diklat teknis pengembangan listrik perdesaan, diklat teknis pengelolaan dan pemantauan lingkungan bidang ketenagalistrikan, dan diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTMH. Di bidang energi baru terbarukan, dikembangkan beberapa diklat teknis, di antaranya diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTS, diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTB, diklat teknis pengelolaan biogas, serta diklat teknis lelang wilayah kerja pertambangan panas bumi. Sementara untuk bidang konservasi energi, diikuti diklat teknis kiat-kiat konservasi energi, diklat teknis audit energi, diklat teknis manajer energi, diklat teknis penghematan energi dan air, diklat teknis adaptasi dan mitigasi gas rumah kaca, dan diklat teknis perencanaan energi. Dengan itu semua, saat ini, PPSDM KEBTKE mempersiapkan sebuah wilayah yang akan dijadikan sebuah kampus besar diklat tersendiri di daerah Cisarua, Jawa Barat, yang akan didirikannya sebuah fasilitas lengkap untuk memenuhi kebutuhan para pengajar dan peserta didik. Kampus Desa Kuta dan Kampus Desa Cisarua merupakan sebuah bentuk keseriusan PPSDM KEBTKE untuk terus menciptakan sumber daya manusia yang berkompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi di setiap bidangnya.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hari ini saya mengunjungi beberapa fasilitas PPSDM, khususnya yang ada di Satker PPSDM KEBTKE yang berada di Cisarua dan di Megamendung. Kita melihat nih di belakang kita, ini beberapa fasilitas yang harusnya nanti muncul di sini, beberapa pelatihan-pelatihan yang kita bisa manfaatkan berdasarkan lokasi yang ada di sekitar sini. Jadi kita berharap kita semuanya bisa memanfaatkan, terutama terkait dengan pelayanan untuk masyarakat. Saya sangat mendukung pengembangan PPSDM KEBTKE untuk memanfaatkan aset-aset yang ada guna perkembangan institusi ini supaya lebih maju lagi ke depannya. Terima kasih. Jaya selalu PPSDM KEBTKE.
Pengembangan sumber daya manusia adalah proses pelatihan pengetahuan dan sertifikasi sumber daya manusia. Maka dari itu, PPSDM KEBTKE hadir dalam sebuah lembaga yang memfasilitasi sumber daya manusia yang baru. Kami siap menciptakan sumber daya manusia yang cepat, cermat, dan produktif.
Tes 1. Siang Bu Enda, tes audio.
Perkenalkan, nama saya Poppy Arkadi dan rekan saya. Dalam studi ini kita mempelajari terkait dengan energi baru terbarukan, khususnya PS dan PA-nya.
Nah, di sini kami tidak hanya melakukan teori, tapi ada juga praktek, dan praktek yang kita telah lakukan di sini adalah terkait perencanaan PLTS dan PLTMA, kemudian perawatan PLTS dan PLTMA, dan ada juga kontrol terkait SCADA.
Nah, jadi teman-teman gak usah ragu lagi untuk join bersama kami di program studi ini, karena tentunya proses kita sangat bagus sekali ya guys ya.
Iya, benar banget Poppy.
Yuk belajar energi terbarukan.
Dunia terus berubah dan juga beriringan dengan semua kebutuhan di dalamnya. Di dalam kehidupan manusia sehari-hari, sumber energi menjadikan hal yang utama bagi keberlangsungan hidup manusia hingga diperlukannya sumber energi terbarukan. PPSDM KEBTKE hadir untuk memenuhi semua tantangan-tantangan yang ada di masa sekarang ini. Di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan, serta konservasinya agar bidang KEBTKE dapat dikelola secara baik. Mengelola sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan menjadi fokus utama bagi PPSDM KEBTKE untuk menjadikannya SDM yang berkompeten, profesional, berdaya saing, dan juga bermoral dalam lingkungan global di bidang ketenagalistrikan atau energi baru terbarukan dan konservasi energi. Dengan program-program unggulan yang diterapkan PPSDM KEBTKE dan juga didukung oleh para pegawai yang profesional dan berdedikasi tinggi. Demi melengkapi kesempurnaan pembentukan sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan. Demi menciptakan dan membentuk SDM yang kompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi. PPSDM KEBTKE memfasilitasi seluruh peserta didik dengan sarana dan prasarana yang sudah memiliki standar ISO. Laboratorium dan workshop menjadi fokus sarana dan prasarana di wilayah Pusdikat KEBTKE.
PPSDM KEBTKE, Kementerian Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral, telah bertransformasi menjadi sebuah lembaga pengembangan SDM di bidang ketenagalistrikan dan EBTKE yang unggul dan selalu menjaga kualitas layanannya. PPSDM KEBTKE mendukung target nasional Net Zero Emission 2060 melalui transisi energi yang harus diwujudkan oleh semua pihak untuk mengurangi dampak perubahan iklim bagi kehidupan masyarakat. Selain itu, Indonesia memiliki energi baru terbarukan dengan potensi yang tinggi, mulai dari matahari, hidro atau air, angin, bioenergi, panas bumi, serta lautan. Hal inilah yang membuat kami semakin matang dan siap melayani Anda. Kami didukung oleh para fasilitator yang berkompeten dan fasilitas yang lengkap sesuai dengan kebutuhan pelatihan, sertifikasi, bimbingan teknis, dan layanan penunjang lainnya. Pelatihan dan sertifikasi dilaksanakan dengan layanan yang prima. Bergabunglah bersama PPSDM KEBT-KE.
Program diklat di dalamnya dibagi menjadi 4 kelompok besar, yaitu bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, konservasi energi, serta manajemen. Bidang ketenagalistrikan terdapat beberapa diklat unggulan yang mencakup diklat teknis inspektur ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perencanaan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perizinan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis uji layak instalasi listrik, diklat teknis perhitungan tarif listrik, diklat teknis pengembangan listrik perdesaan, diklat teknis pengelolaan dan pemantauan lingkungan bidang ketenagalistrikan, dan diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTMH. Di bidang energi baru terbarukan, dikembangkan beberapa diklat teknis, di antaranya diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTS, diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTB, diklat teknis pengelolaan biogas, serta diklat teknis lelang wilayah kerja pertambangan panas bumi. Sementara untuk bidang konservasi energi, diikuti diklat teknis kiat-kiat konservasi energi, diklat teknis audit energi, diklat teknis manajer energi, diklat teknis penghematan energi dan air, diklat teknis adaptasi dan mitigasi gas rumah kaca, dan diklat teknis perencanaan energi. Dengan itu semua, saat ini, PPSDM KEBT-KE mempersiapkan sebuah wilayah yang akan dijadikan sebuah kampus besar diklat tersendiri di daerah Cisarua, Jawa Barat, yang akan didirikannya sebuah fasilitas lengkap untuk memenuhi kebutuhan para pengajar dan peserta didik. Kampus Desa Kuta dan Kampus Desa Cisarua merupakan sebuah bentuk keseriusan PPSDM KEBT-KE untuk terus menciptakan sumber daya manusia yang berkompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi di setiap bidangnya.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hari ini saya mengunjungi beberapa fasilitas PPSDM, khususnya yang ada di Satker PPSDM KEBT-KE yang berada di Cisarua dan di Megamendung. Kita melihat nih di belakang kita, ini beberapa fasilitas yang harusnya nanti muncul di sini, beberapa pelatihan-pelatihan yang kita bisa manfaatkan berdasarkan lokasi yang ada di sekitar sini. Jadi kita berharap kita semuanya bisa memanfaatkan, terutama terkait dengan pelayanan untuk masyarakat. Saya sangat mendukung pengembangan PPSDM KEBT-KE untuk memanfaatkan aset-aset yang ada guna perkembangan institusi ini supaya lebih maju lagi ke depannya. Terima kasih. Jaya selalu PPSDM KEBT-KE.
sumber daya manusia adalah proses pelatihan pengetahuan dan sertifikasi sumber daya manusia. Maka dari itu, PPSDM KE-BTKE hadir dalam sebuah lembaga yang memfasilitasi sumber daya manusia yang baru. Kami siap menciptakan sumber daya manusia yang cepat, cermat, dan produktif.
pelaksanaan PLTS dan PLTMH, kemudian perawatan PLTS dan PLTMH, dan ada juga kontrol terkait SCADA.
Nah, jadi teman-teman gak usah ragu lagi untuk join bersama kami di program study ini, karena tentunya prospek kita sangat bagus sekali ya guys ya.
Iya, benar banget Kopi.
Yuk belajar. Energi terbarukan.
Dunia terus berubah dan juga beriringan dengan semua kebutuhan di dalamnya. Di dalam kehidupan manusia sehari-hari, sumber energi menjadikan hal yang utama bagi keberlangsungan hidup manusia hingga diperlukannya sumber energi terbarukan. PPSDM KE-BTKE hadir untuk memenuhi semua tantangan-tantangan yang ada di masa sekarang ini. Di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan, serta konservasinya agar bidang KE-BTKE dapat dikelola secara baik. Mengelola sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan menjadi fokus utama bagi PPSDM KE-BTKE untuk menjadikannya SDM yang berkompeten, profesional, berdaya saing, dan juga bermoral dalam lingkungan global di bidang ketenagalistrikan atau energi baru terbarukan dan konservasi energi. Dengan program-program unggulan yang diterapkan PPSDM KE-BTKE dan juga didukung oleh para pegawai yang profesional dan berdedikasi tinggi. Demi melengkapi kesempurnaan pembentukan sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan. Demi menciptakan dan membentuk SDM yang kompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi. PPSDM KE-BTKE memfasilitasi seluruh peserta didik dengan sarana dan prasarana yang sudah memiliki standar ISO. Laboratorium dan workshop menjadi fokus sarana dan prasarana di wilayah Pusdiklat KEBTKE.
PPSDM KEBTKE, Kementerian Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral, telah bertransformasi menjadi sebuah lembaga pengembangan SDM di bidang ketenagalistrikan dan EBTKE yang unggul dan selalu menjaga kualitas layanannya. PPSDM KEBTKE mendukung target nasional Net Zero Emission 2060 melalui transisi energi yang harus diwujudkan oleh semua pihak untuk mengurangi dampak perubahan iklim bagi kehidupan masyarakat. Selain itu, Indonesia memiliki energi baru terbarukan dengan potensi yang tinggi, mulai dari matahari, hidro atau air, angin, bioenergi, panas bumi, serta lautan. Hal inilah yang membuat kami semakin matang dan siap melayani Anda. Kami didukung oleh para fasilitator yang berkompeten dan fasilitas yang lengkap sesuai dengan kebutuhan pelatihan, sertifikasi, bimbingan teknis, dan layanan penunjang lainnya. Pelatihan dan sertifikasi dilaksanakan dengan layanan yang prima. Bergabunglah bersama PPSDM KEBTKE.
Program diklat di dalamnya dibagi menjadi 4 kelompok besar, yaitu bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, konservasi energi, serta manajemen. Bidang ketenagalistrikan terdapat beberapa diklat unggulan yang mencakup diklat teknis inspektur ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perencanaan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perizinan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis uji layak instalasi listrik, diklat teknis perhitungan tarif listrik, diklat teknis pengembangan listrik perdesaan, diklat teknis pengelolaan dan pemantauan lingkungan bidang ketenagalistrikan, dan diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTMH. Di bidang energi baru terbarukan,
Baik, selamat siang, selamat datang Bapak Ibu, Mas Mbak, Sobat Energi, selamat siang Pak Kepala PPSDM KEBTKE, Bapak Susetyo Edi Prabowo.
Selamat siang, Bu Enda.
Baik, selamat siang Pak. Baik, selamat siang Bu Dian.
Selamat siang, Mbak Enda.
Halo, baik.
Selamat siang, Bu Dian.
Selamat siang, Pak Edi. Semoga sehat, Pak.
Sama-sama, Ibu.
Baik, kita sudah bersama sekitar 300-an peserta dan terus bertambah. Dan waktu juga sudah menunjukkan pukul 13:03. Mari kita mulai. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan. Yang kami hormati Bapak Kepala Badan Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia, Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral, atau yang hari ini diwakili oleh Bapak Kepala Pusat Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia Ketenagalistrikan, Energi Baru Terbarukan dan Konservasi Energi, Bapak Susetyo Edi Prabowo. Kemudian selamat siang, Koordinator Penyelenggaraan dan Sarana Prasarana Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia, Ibu Elin Lindiasari, para Direktur, Kepala Balai, Pejabat Pimpinan Tinggi Pratama di lingkungan Kementerian SDM. Juga kami ucapkan selamat siang selaku narasumber dan pemberi tanggapan dari technical expert, yaitu Ibu Michael Hoyes dari GFA Consulting Group, kemudian Ibu Lea Miram dari GFA Consulting Group, kemudian ada Dr. Theo dan Bapak Hendrik, serta juga telah hadir moderator kita siang hari ini, Ibu Dian Elvira Rosa, RS
RISD Component 3 Manager Communication and Information Exchange. Kemudian para koordinator, subkoordinator, para pejabat fungsional PPSDM KIBTKE, Sobat Energi, para peserta webinar, selamat siang. Yang kami hormati dan kami banggakan, perkenalkan, mohon izin saya adalah Endah Heliana, Pranata Humas PPSDM KIBTKE akan menjadi MC pada siang hari ini. Sebelum berlanjut, mohon izin menginformasikan, kami menyediakan bantuan interpreter bagi peserta webinar. Peserta cukup klik saja di bagian bawah aplikasi Zoom berupa akun Globe, tinggal diklik dan memilih dalam bahasa Indonesia atau Inggris. Simultaneous interpretation is provided throughout the webinar. Please click on the globe icon on the bottom of your screen of your Zoom and choose your preferred language. Pada 20 September ini, PPSDM KIBTKE menyelenggarakan webinar dengan mengangkat tema Green Hydrogen sebagai energi baru terbarukan, peluang dan tantangan. Webinar hari ini juga terselenggara atas kerjasama PPSDM KIBTKE dengan proyek Renewable Energy Skills Development RISD. Proyek ini merupakan kemitraan antara pemerintah Indonesia melalui BPSDM SDM dan pemerintah Swiss melalui State Secretariat for Economic Affairs SECO. Baiklah, Bapak Ibu hadirin yang kami hormati, Sobat Energi, saatnya kita sekarang mendengarkan sambutan dari Kepala BPSDM SDM yang akan diwakili oleh Kepala PPSDM KIBTKE yang sekaligus akan membuka webinar siang hari ini. Kepada Bapak Susatyo Edi Prabowo, waktu dan tempat kami persilakan.
Terima kasih Bu Endah. Yang saya hormati para narasumber dan moderator, di sini ada Ibu Mike Deus, Project Manager for Sustainable Energy and Green Hydrogen, GFA Consulting Group GmbH, Ibu Lea Miram, Konsultan Sustainable Energy, Green Hydrogen, GFA Consulting Group GmbH, Bapak Hendrik, Senior Advisor Sustainable Energy, Renewable and Hydrogen and Power, GFA Consulting Group GmbH, Bapak Dr. Theo Neste, Senior Energy Consultant, GFA Consulting Group GmbH, serta Ibu Dian, Manajer Komponen 3 RISD. Yang saya hormati para panelis yang terdiri dari Bapak Ibu Pimpinan Tinggi Pratama, pejabat administrasi dan fungsional di lingkungan Kementerian ESDM dan Bapak Ibu undangan, serta para peserta webinar keempat tahun 2023 PPSDM KIBTKE yang mengikuti kegiatan ini melalui akun Zoom, YouTube, dan sosial media PPSDM KIBTKE yang saya hormati. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Pertama-tama kita mengucapkan puji dan syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Tuhan yang Maha Esa, atas berkah dan karunia-Nya kita dapat bertemu pada hari ini Rabu 20 September 2023 dalam keadaan sehat walafiat, untuk mengikuti webinar yang sangat penting ini guna menambah wawasan dan pengetahuan serta informasi terkait ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, dan konservasi energi. Pada kesempatan ini, izinkan saya menyampaikan permohonan maaf dari Kepala BPSDM ESDM, Bapak Prauro Nur Cahyo, yang berhalangan hadir. Selanjutnya, izinkan saya membacakan sambutan sebagai berikut. Bapak, Ibu, para panelis dan peserta yang kami hormati, alhamdulillah kita patut bersyukur bersama bahwa hari ini kita dipertemukan kembali dalam acara webinar PPSDM KIBTKE yang keempat di tahun 2023 dengan topik Green Hydrogen sebagai energi baru terbarukan, peluang dan tantangan, yang akan disampaikan oleh 4 narasumber kita dari GFA Group GmbH yang berbasis di Hamburg, Jerman. Pemerintah terus berkomitmen untuk mempercepat pencapaian net zero emission pada tahun 2060 atau lebih cepat. Indonesia yang memiliki sumber kekayaan alam yang melimpah, memiliki modal kuat untuk pengembangan hidrogen hijau. Hidrogen hijau akan memainkan peran penting dalam dekarbonisasi sektor transportasi yang akan dimulai pada tahun 2031 dan sektor industri pada tahun 2041. Dalam peta jalan transisi energi menuju karbon netral di tahun 2035, ditargetkan penurunan emisi sebesar 475 juta ton CO2. Langkah yang diambil antara lain dengan pemanfaatan hidrogen sebesar 328 MW. Selanjutnya, pada tahun 2050 ditargetkan penurunan emisi sebesar 956 juta ton CO2. Beberapa langkah yang diambil antara lain adalah pemanfaatan hidrogen sebesar 9 gigawatt. Selain itu, Indonesia memiliki posisi yang sangat strategis, baik secara geografis maupun ekonomi.
Izin Pak Edi, mohon maaf ini sepertinya muted Pak, suara Bapak.
Bisa didengar Ibu, Bapak Ibu?
Sudah bisa Pak, terima kasih.
Sebagai kelanjutan dari dokumen strategi hidrogen nasional, saat ini Kementerian SDM sedang menyusun dokumen peta jalan nasional hidrogen dan amonia yang berisi rencana penerapan hidrogen di Indonesia hingga tahun 2060 yang mencakup regulasi, standar, infrastruktur, teknologi, dan supply demand. Bapak Ibu para panelis dan peserta yang kami hormati, berbagai kesempatan dan peluang dalam mengembangkan hidrogen sebagai energi terbarukan di Indonesia saat ini belum banyak dibahas. Padahal green hidrogen merupakan energi terbarukan dan memiliki emisi karbon yang rendah dibanding grey hidrogen yang dihasilkan dari energi fosil. Green hidrogen kedepannya dapat digunakan untuk memproduksi green ammonia yang digunakan untuk pupuk dan bahan bakar. Hidrogen telah dimanfaatkan di Indonesia dalam sektor industri, terutama sebagai bahan baku pupuk. Konsumsi hidrogen di Indonesia saat ini berkisar 1,75 juta ton per tahun dengan pemanfaatan didominasi untuk urea sebesar 88%, amonia 4%, dan kilang minyak 2%. Melalui teknologi yang dikembangkan, green hidrogen dapat menjadi bahan bakar tanpa emisi yang digunakan sebagai bahan bakar bagi pembangkitan listrik bersama dengan oksigen menggunakan suatu unit yang dinamakan dengan hidrogen fuel cell. Produk sampingan dari reaksi ini hanyalah uap air, sehingga hidrogen fuel merupakan jenis energi yang sangat bersih. Terdapat beberapa metode untuk memproduksi hidrogen sebagai bahan bakar. Saat ini metode yang paling umum digunakan adalah steam reforming menggunakan gas alam. Selain itu, terdapat beberapa metode lainnya seperti gasifikasi, elektrolisis, serta proses biologis. Melalui webinar ini, Badan Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia Kementerian SDM melalui PPSDM KIBTKE mengundang para ahli dari GFA terkait green hydrogen. Adapun topik yang akan dibahas adalah pengenalan hidrogen, value chain, hidrogen uptake yang mencakup perkembangan pasar, prekondisi dari faktor ekonomi untuk pengembangan green hidrogen, dan dimensi sosioekonomi dari hidrogen. Juga akan dibahas mengenai peluang dan tantangan green hidrogen di Indonesia. Terakhir, akan ada diskusi dan forum terbuka untuk mendiskusikan contoh proyek dan pengembangan green hydrogen dengan para ahli dari GFE. Melalui pemaparan dan diskusi terbuka dengan ahli hidrogen internasional ini, diharapkan webinar kali ini dapat mendukung proses transisi energi Indonesia yang berkeadilan, serta dapat mencapai target net zero emission paling lambat pada tahun 2060. Bapak Ibu para panelis dan peserta yang kami hormati, sebagai penutup, mari kita panjatkan doa, semoga kegiatan webinar ini terselenggara dengan baik. Terima kasih kepada para narasumber, moderator, para panelis, dan peserta. Semoga Tuhan Yang Maha Kuasa memberikan petunjuk dan merahmati setiap langkah dan upaya kita. Dengan mengucapkan Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, kegiatan webinar PPSDM KEBTKE yang keempat di tahun 2023 saya nyatakan dibuka secara resmi. Sekian dan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Bapak Kepala PPSDM KEBTKE, Bapak Susetyo Edi Prabowo. Baik, Bapak Ibu, mengingat ada keperluan lain dari Bapak Kepala PPSDM KEBTKE, dengan ini kami mengucapkan terima kasih Bapak telah dibuka webinar hari ini. Apabila sekiranya ada keperluan lain diperkenankan untuk meninggalkan webinar. Baik, nah Bapak, Ibu, Mas, Mbak, dan Sobat Energi, PPSDM KEBTKE telah meluluskan lebih dari 20.000 alumni dan telah menerapkan pengetahuan dan kompetensi mereka di sektor ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, dan konservasi energi. PPSDM KEBTKE memberikan pelayanan publik melalui pelatihan dan sertifikasi untuk aparatur, masyarakat umum, juga pengelola industri di sektor ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, dan konservasi energi. Juga PPSDM KEBTKE memberikan jasa konsultasi dan audit energi pada industri, bangunan gedung, kerjasama, penyewaan dan penyelenggaraan aktivitas baik meeting, insentif, convention, dan exhibition. Untuk lebih lengkapnya, Sobat bisa mengunjungi website kami di ppsdmkebtke.esdm.go.id. Dan jangan lupa ikuti sosial media kami baik di Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, dan Twitter dengan akun @ppsdmkebtke. Sebelum saya berlanjut memberikan mic ini kepada Budian, saya ingin mengumumkan ada kuis seru selama webinar berlangsung. Kuis yang pertama yaitu kuis sosial media. Nah, Sobat PPSDM KEBTKE dipersilakan untuk memposting review materi kegiatan hari ini di Instagram. Untuk 3 postingan terbaik akan mendapatkan merchandise. Rinciannya nanti saya akan kirimkan di chat Zoom. Kemudian yang kedua adalah akan ada 3 hadiah untuk 3 penanya dengan pertanyaan yang menarik dan terbaik. Nah, terbaik pertama akan mendapatkan voucher training, sedangkan penanya kedua dan ketiga yang terbaik akan mendapatkan merchandise menarik dari kami. Nah, semua pemenang akan diumumkan di akhir acara dan dapat konfirmasi di sosial media PPSDM KEBTKE, terutama di Instagram. Nah, selanjutnya kami akan menyerahkan webinar hari ini kepada moderator kita, Ibu Dian Elvira Rosa, RISD Komponen 3 Manager Communication and Information Exchange. Mari beri tepuk tangan virtual yang meriah untuk para narasumber dan moderator kita siang hari ini. Kepada Mbak Dian, waktu dan tempat kami persilakan. Silakan.
Terima kasih Mbak Endah. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati, para pejabat Kementerian SDM yang tidak dapat saya sebutkan satu persatu. Saat ini sudah lebih dari 500 peserta yang bergabung dalam webinar ini. Jadi semoga kita semua dalam keadaan sehat walafiat dan bersemangat ya untuk menyimak topik kita pada siang hari ini yang sangat menarik, yaitu hidrogen, khususnya hidrogen hijau, sebagai opsi sumber energi terbarukan beserta peluang dan tantangannya. Sebelum kita memasuki inti dari acara, sebelum paparan, saya ingin memberikan kuis singkat dulu tentang hidrogen hijau. Mohon bantuan panitia untuk menampilkannya di layar. Baik, di sini sudah ada 3 pertanyaan. Silakan saya undang Bapak Ibu semua untuk mengisi kuis singkat ini. Saya beri waktu 1-2 menit ya untuk menjawab dan membaca pertanyaan yang ada di layar. Ya, ini sudah kita lihat ya, sudah ada beberapa yang mengisi. Baik. Pertanyaan pertama, bahan utama apa yang digunakan untuk memproduksi hidrogen hijau? Lalu pertanyaan kedua, proses apa yang paling umum digunakan untuk memproduksi hidrogen hijau? Pertanyaan ketiga, apa salah satu tantangan utama yang dihadapi dalam pengembangan teknologi hidrogen hijau skala besar? Saya tunggu 1 menit lagi Bapak Ibu. Ini sudah hampir 200 peserta yang menjawab. Saya tunggu sedikit lagi ya. Baik. Oke, sudah 300 orang nih menjawab dari sekitar 500 peserta webinar. Baik, saya berikan jawaban yang benar ya. Untuk pertanyaan pertama, bahan utama apa yang digunakan untuk memproduksi hidrogen hijau? Jawaban yang benar adalah B, energi terbarukan dan air. Nah, di sini 78% peserta sudah menjawab dengan benar ya. Congratulations, berarti sudah paham ya mengenai pertanyaan ini. Lalu yang kedua, proses apa yang paling umum digunakan dalam memproduksi hidrogen hijau? Nah, jawaban yang benar adalah elektrolisis. Oke, ini sebagian besar dari peserta yang menjawab juga sudah benar, sekitar 60%. Lalu yang ketiga, salah satu tantangan utama yang dihadapi dalam pengembangan teknologi hidrogen hijau skala besar, itu jawaban yang benar adalah B, biaya produksi yang tinggi. Oke, jadi sebagian besar juga sudah menjawab dengan benar. Oke, silakan ditutup kuisnya, Mas Davin. Thank you. Oke, baik. Bapak Ibu, terima kasih banyak atas partisipasinya dalam kuis singkat tadi. Telah hadir bersama kita 2 narasumber ahli hidrogen dari Jerman. Yang pertama adalah Ibu Maike Hoys. Welcome Maike, it's very good to have you with us. Ibu Maike Hoys merupakan PTX and Green Hydrogen Professional dengan sertifikasi dari RENAP dan memiliki pengalaman lebih dari 8 tahun sebagai konsultan di GFA Consulting Group, salah satu perusahaan konsultan terbesar di Jerman. Bidang keahlian Bu Maike adalah hidrogen hijau dan energi, dan beliau memiliki pengalaman menangani proyek di Jakarta, Meksiko, Timur Tengah, Afrika Utara, dan juga Amerika Tengah. Nah, lalu pembicara kita yang kedua adalah Ibu Lea Miram. Welcome Lea, we're also very delighted to have you with us. Thank you for joining. Ibu Lea juga merupakan PTX and Green Hydrogen Professional dengan sertifikasi dari RENAP, dan saat ini bekerja sebagai konsultan di GFA Consulting Group dengan bidang keahlian hidrogen dan energi berkelanjutan. Ibu Lea menangani beberapa proyek dan studi terkait hidrogen di beberapa negara, termasuk Afrika Selatan dan Namibia. Selain Ibu Maike dan Ibu Lea, telah bergabung bersama kita 2 tenaga ahli senior lainnya dari GFA Consulting Group, yaitu Bapak Hendrik dan Bapak Theo, yang memiliki pengalaman luas dalam penyusunan kebijakan, national roadmap, dan strategi pengembangan hidrogen hijau untuk berbagai negara. Nah, Bapak Hendrik dan Bapak Theo akan ikut menjadi penanggap dalam sesi tanya jawab nanti. Jadi Bapak Ibu silakan apabila ada pertanyaan, Bisa menulis di kolom chat ya, Q&A, langsung saja ditulis. Dan nanti penanggapnya akan ada dari 4 tenaga ahli yang hadir pada siang hari ini. Thank you very much, Henrik and Theo, for joining us, and we look forward to your input during our discussion session later. Oke, baik. Presentasi akan disampaikan dalam bahasa Inggris, tetapi sebagaimana sudah disampaikan oleh Bu Endah tadi, tersedia terjemahan simultan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Silakan klik tombol bola dunia di layar Zoom masing-masing dan pilih bahasa yang diinginkan. Selama paparan, nanti saya tunggu pertanyaan-pertanyaan dari Bapak Ibu. Nanti di akhir acara, saya akan memilih 3 pertanyaan terbaik untuk mendapatkan hadiah menarik dari PPSDM KEBTKE. Alright, we will now start the presentation. We will start with you, Maika. You can share your screen directly and operate your PowerPoint. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Diane, for this nice introduction. And yeah, good afternoon and welcome from my side also to everybody. It's an honor to participate, and I'm very excited to give you this presentation. So let me quickly share my screen. Is it okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, welcome again to this seminar. I would like to first quickly introduce you to GFA, and then we will speak about hydrogen. What is it and why do we need it? I will touch upon the green hydrogen value chain, so on the production side, the transport, and also possible applications. And then I will hand over to my colleague Lea, who will speak about the international hydrogen uptake and also opportunities for Indonesia. And in the end, as already mentioned, we will have a Q&A and the opportunity also to exchange with our managers and experts about project examples from GFA and our colleagues who have played a major role in implementing those projects. Let's first start with some info on GFA. So GFA is one of the leading European consulting firms in the international cooperation based in Hamburg, Germany. And annually, we conduct around 300 projects around the world in different sectors. So here you can see our main business lines. One of them is also energy. So in the energy sector, GFA implements projects in strategy, policy, regulation, and legislation, also in the renewable energy sector, in energy efficiency and energy management, as well as green hydrogen and PTX and energy transition. So this is about GFA. And now let's jump straight into the topic. So what is actually green hydrogen? So from the quiz we have seen, you are already pretty knowledgeable. But so just quickly some major characteristics of hydrogen. Hydrogen is the lightest and simplest element in the periodic table of elements. And by the way, it's also the most common one in our universe. At room temperature, it's an odorless, colorless, and tasteless gas. And when we cool it down to minus 252.87 degrees Celsius, it changes its state to liquid hydrogen. It has a very high energy content per weight, which makes it very interesting in the energy transition, especially in decarbonizing energy-intensive sectors. But at the same time, it has a very low density, which can cause issues in the transport and storage. Hydrogen is not toxic, it's not polluting, it's not radioactive, etc. So apart from the fact that it's highly flammable, it is very clean and very safe chemical element. So you have probably heard of the different colors of hydrogen. So why do we speak of different colors of hydrogen if I just said it's a colorless gas? So this is actually a coding system that has been established internationally to differentiate between the most common energy sources and production processes of hydrogen. So here in the first line, as it were, you have the different energy sources, and the gray ones are the different processes, how you can produce hydrogen. So when we speak about green hydrogen, the first one, we refer to hydrogen produced by electrolysis with electricity from renewable energies. This is generally solar and wind, but can also be hydropower and geothermal power. For example, in Indonesia, we have a lot of hydro and geothermal power. Then yellow, and it's also very important that this renewable energy has to be additional to the energy that is already on demand in the grid. When we speak of yellow hydrogen, we just talk about hydrogen from the grid. So this can be all sorts of energy sources. It depends very much on the electricity or energy mix in the grid. When we talk about red or pink hydrogen, it comes from nuclear power. When we speak about turquoise hydrogen, it comes from natural gas produced by pyrolysis. And when we speak about gray hydrogen, it's from natural gas produced by steam reforming. And then we have the blue hydrogen. It's actually the same as the gray hydrogen, but with one step in between, which is carbon capture and storage. So the CO2 is not emitted to the atmosphere, but it's captured and stored. And then we have, when we have coal as an energy source, we also get gray hydrogen if it's steam reforming, or brown or black if it is produced by coal gasification. So the gray hydrogen here amounts to over 90%, some even say over 95% of the global hydrogen produced. So there is a huge leverage and opportunity when we try to replace the gray hydrogen with the green hydrogen. And this is a great opportunity also for Indonesia. So sometimes some countries also talk about blue hydrogen because it doesn't emit direct CO2 to the atmosphere. But if we really want to stop the climate crisis, we have to get away from fossil fuels altogether. So for really energy transition, we want to focus on green hydrogen. So this is also why we will talk about green hydrogen in this presentation. What are the main challenges in energy transition, and why is green hydrogen so important in that? So there are actually two main reasons for that. The first being the so-called hard to abate sectors. So why can we not just directly electrify the sectors? There are some sectors with high CO2 emissions that are really hard to electrify, such as steel, cement, chemical industry, shipping, and heavy-duty transportation, aviation, the sectors that you can see here. We really need alternatives to decarbonize them. And the second reason is the higher the share of the renewable energies in our mix, the more we have to deal with intermittent or fluctuating energy sources such as wind and power, because sometimes there's wind, sometimes there's sun, but sometimes there's no wind and no sun. So there is a need for dispatchable generation that delivers output on demand. And with fossil fuels, this is more controllable, but with renewable energies, this is very hard. So what we need for that is large energy storage capacities, so especially long-term and seasonal power storage. And green hydrogen is one solution for both of these major challenges. So let's just have a quick look on the green hydrogen value chain. So it all starts with the renewable energy generation. The next step is the electrolysis, where H2 is produced with power and water. And then you can either directly use it as hydrogen, or you can convert it into different products that you see here. They're also called derivatives. So methane, methanol, kerosene, ammonia, etc. And then the next step is the transport and storage. And then there are the different applications in the different sectors. So now we will speak about all of these individual steps of the value chain. In the case of the conversion, I will not go into very much detail of the respective processes, since this would be beyond the scope of this webinar, but I will touch upon the most important ones, because the direct use sometimes of hydrogen is not as attractive as actually the use as a derivative. So we'll see about this. So let's talk about green hydrogen production. So how it is produced, we have the surplus renewable energy. It's important in order to be green hydrogen that it's additional to the demand, and we have water. And through electrolysis, the water is split up into its elements by hydrogen and oxygen. These are the two products we get out. All this electrolysis process happens in so-called electrolyzers. There are various types of electrolyzers. I don't want to bore you with the details, but I want you to know it's depends very much on the hydrogen project that you have, which is the best option to use. So for example, we have the alkaline electrolyzers. They are very proven and mature technology with high megawatt ranges. They are also low cost, but they require a lot of space and they have slow responses. Then we have the PEM or PEM electrolyzers. They have a very high efficiency and performance. They also can be compact and they can be scalable, so they can be adjusted to your needs in the project, but they have a high capex because the membrane is made has precious metal in it, and so it also has a low durability sometimes. The AEM also has a very high performance and efficiency, and it's compact and scalable, but it has also high capex. It has low cost, but it's a low durability, and it's also not such a proven technology as, for example, alkaline. And the last one is the so-called solid oxide ceramic electrolyte, like SOEC. This has probably the highest efficiency and durability, but it operates with temperatures above 500 degrees Celsius. So sometimes even 1000 degrees Celsius. So it's only for large scale applications. And it's, for example, very good to use it with for using waste heat from industrial processes. And when we speak about hydrogen production, it's also interesting what's actually the cost of green hydrogen. So the cost of green hydrogen is influenced by several factors, but the most important three ones are, first of all, the electrolyzer capex, then the cost of the renewable energy used in the process, and the number of operating hours per year. So it's also called the full load hours or the capacity factor. So these three factors define most of the green hydrogen price. Present day industrial electrolyzers, what I just showed you, they require around 50 kilowatt hours of electricity to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And the estimate, so depending on what's the price for electricity, then you can more or less calculate the price. An estimated cost on average in the European Union as of 2020 for fossil-based hydrogen is approximately 1.5 euros per kilogram, and the estimated cost on average for renewable or green hydrogen ranges between 2.5 and 5.5 euros per kilogram. So what you can see, there is still a gap to bridge. The cost of renewable hydrogen is still higher than the fossil-based one, but the capital expenditure of electrolyzers, which is like one important cost factor, has fallen by 60% in the last 10 years, and it's expected to halve again by 2030 due to economies of scale. So, and moreover, the cost is really expected to fall considerably in the next years. And in regions where renewable energy is cheap, such as, for example, the MENA region or some regions in Africa, Green hydrogen production methods are expected to overtake fossil fuel-based production methods by 2030. So the prices of fossil versus renewable hydrogen are expected to converge by 2030. So here's a graphic regarding the capex of the electrolyzers that is expected to fall considerably in the next years. So let's talk about the next step in the value chain, which is the conversion. First of all, I wanted to show you a definition of Power-to-X, because we also speak of PTX. So PTX, we understand different technologies to convert, store, and reconvert electricity into a variety of end products, typically using surplus electric power from renewable energies. And I wanted to show you the two main conversion processes and PTX products that are really interesting for many of the partner countries that we work in. First of them is green ammonia. Green ammonia, I think, is also very interesting for Indonesia. Indonesia is currently also importing ammonia for different industries, so this could be also relevant. The process to produce green ammonia is the so-called Haber-Bosch synthesis. H2 is there combined with nitrogen from the air and converted to ammonia. And then the hydrogen can serve as a key feedstock in the chemical and in the fertilizer industry, but also as a fuel for maritime shipping. So it's very attractive for many countries since the infrastructure for ammonia is already in place, because we have the conventional ammonia. And the second one is the so-called Fischer-Tropsch synthesis to produce e-fuels such as kerosene and methanol. This is a little bit more complicated, because for the green fuels, we need renewable carbon. The C atom is needed from carbon capture and storage. And this is sometimes not a short-term option for some of our countries, because the infrastructure for CCS is not in place. So it's really important that that the C is captured from its either direct air capture or carbon capture and storage. These are two different processes to get this renewable carbon, as it were. Okay, then let's talk about transport of hydrogen. There are different ways to transport it. So when we have the gaseous hydrogen, we can transport it by road, and it's compressed and transported in gas tanks. Or if it's gaseous, we can also transport it by pipeline. It's also compressed and then pumped in pipelines to its final destination. There are two ways of transporting hydrogen in the pipeline. One is by using the existing natural gas pipeline and also blending it with natural gas. And you can also repurpose pipelines for blending hydrogen into it. And the other one is constructing new pipelines and transporting 100% hydrogen in it. Then you can transport hydrogen in liquid form by road. Then it's cooled beyond the boiling point and stored also in tanks. This the upside is that it requires less space than the gaseous hydrogen, but it has higher capex and also energy losses due to the cooling process. In the future, we will also be able to transport hydrogen by shipping. Currently, there's only one available ship. It's, I think, in Japan to transport hydrogen. So for now, for the time being, the transport of derivatives such as ammonia and methanol are a more viable option because it's far less complicated. But this is an option for the future. And the last one that I wanted to show you is the so-called LOHC liquid organic hydrogen carriers. This is also a way to transport hydrogen. It's in this case, it's not split up into atoms, so that there are no evaporation losses, but it's bind. It's bound. You bind it to molecules, to liquid carriers, to make it easier to store and transport it over long distances. So the upside is that there are no evaporation losses, and you can use the conventional fuel infrastructure for it. But at the downside, we have high energy losses through this dehydrogenation process we need at the end. Okay, and then we already come to the different applications. So you see there are many possible applications for green hydrogen in the transport, in the industry, and also in the energy sector. So this letter here, it's Liebreich's hydrogen letter. I think it provides a good overview over which green hydrogen applications are really necessary or even indispensable, and which ones are not such a good idea because they're very inefficient, like, for example, hydrogen-fueled cars. Then it's the better option to directly electrify cars, for example. So I wanted to give you 3 quick examples of applications that are already under development or even being implemented in areas up here that have a high leverage to decarbonize and to support energy transition, which are shipping, steel, and seasonal power storage. So it's one from the mobility sector, one from the industry, and one from the power sector. So the first example from the industry is a project by Salzgitter Steel Company in Germany. Here the green hydrogen acts as a reduction agent for the iron ore, and it replaces the coal in the whole conventional blast furnace process. So this will reduce the CO2 emissions by 95% once they have transformed the whole process to using green hydrogen. And this can have actually a considerable impact on Germany's CO2 emissions, because this is one of the highest emitters of CO2 in the industry, the steel industry. Then the second example is from the mobility. Their consortium under Norwegian lead is producing currently the first green ammonia powered vessel. So there are various studies under development, and the first green ammonia fuel ships are expected to start from 2025. It's already in 2 years. Sorry. And at the same time, there are other companies such as Maersk, for example, that are ordering ships on large scale that run on green methanol. So it's 2 technologies that are coexisting, let's say, or being developed at the same time, and both based on green hydrogen. And the last example that is already under development is a long-term storage by RWE. It's a German energy provider. RWE will use underground salt caverns that have been used for natural gas storage, and they are still currently being used for natural gas storage, and they will fill them with green hydrogen. So if you remember the graphic where I showed you the 2 main challenges for the energy transition, this tackles the second one. So this provides seasonal power storage. Yeah, so these are some examples where green hydrogen can actually contribute to energy transition and a zero carbon economy. And yeah, I look forward to your questions. And now I will hand over to my colleague Lea, who will talk about the opportunities and the international green hydrogen uptake. Thank you.
Thank you, Maika. Over to you, Leah.
Yes, good morning from Hamburg. Good afternoon to Indonesia. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the organizers for inviting. I'm just trying to share my screen. Okay, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. All right. After Maika has given you an overview about green hydrogen and its concrete relevance in the context of a sustainable energy transition, I will rather focus now on specific opportunities for Indonesia and discuss aspects which you have to consider to ensure a sustainable uptake of a hydrogen economy. To start with opportunities for Indonesia, the overall goal is to decarbonize or defossilize by 2060, reach net zero. And as Maika has just elaborated, there are plenty of opportunities how hydrogen can actually support this transition. If we look to the industry sector, we have, as just outlined, steel production. To reach competitiveness, the carbon price must increase as mechanism because at the moment it's more expensive. But for example, especially ammonia can be something which is really relevant for the third term. Here it can serve as feedstock, not only as energy carrier in that sense. You have methanol refineries and the cement industry, which offer massive potential for decarbonization. If you look to the transport sector, it's especially relevant for heavy duty and medium duty trucks and buses, while just as also shown very vividly in the examples, it offers also huge opportunities for marine transportation, as for example, the ship, which we've just seen from Maersk, and the aviation sector. Last but not least, it can also pose an opportunity for hydrogen-based rails in areas where there is currently no direct electrification possible. For the power sector, it can not only replace natural gas and gas turbines and power plants, it's also an important opportunity for energy storage in isolated areas. Especially considering Indonesia's geography, this can pose a solution to off-grid energy storage system and even contribute to the expansion of renewable energy for the production of green hydrogen. And this can contribute to the acceleration of the electrification and grid expansion process. But it's not only in relation to domestic consumption where the opportunities lay. You can generate even more revenues by exporting products like ammonia. And this can not only generate additional revenues, but also support the diversification of economy. Having that said, I'm coming to the next slide. Something this is really important to consider to also maintain the current market shares which you might have an exporter. It is crucial to consider mechanisms like the so-called carbon border adjustment mechanism. This is a mechanism which was developed by the EU, which will put a financial value on embedded greenhouse gas emissions on certain products that are imported to the EU. To make it a bit more understandable, this would mean if I'm an exporter of a certain product, for example, aluminium or cement from Indonesia, and I want to export it to EU, and I have not decarbonized the product, or it's not accounted via a certain emission trading system, a national trading system, I have to purchase the certificates for the CO2, which has been emitted in the production process, and then imported to the European Union. This means in the long run, products which have already made an effort in decarbonization might be even more competitive in the long run. If you don't achieve this decarbonization, you can even lose market shares. In the European Union, we have a pilot phase now where it's starting with cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity and hydrogen, but this will be even expanded in the future. So this is a very important aspect to consider, that it's not only for domestic consumption opportunity, but also to maintain market shares in the future. So I think we have all got a glimpse about the importance of a hydrogen uptake, but now the question is, what do we have to do to ensure it's done sustainably, or how do we create it in a successful manner? This actually requires several considerations, ranging from policy to regulations to sustainability aspects and social environmental criteria, which go hand in hand with compliance and certification. I would like to touch up on all these aspects. I know it's rather complex, but to give you a glimpse about the multi-layer facets of the topic. Starting with the policy framework, what does this actually mean? It could be, for example, the implementation of long-term goals and short-term targets. This includes national decarbonization goals and targets, binding CO2 reduction targets in end-use sectors, and this can be part of a so-called national hydrogen strategy or roadmap. By introducing these targets, you also give a provision and direction and market foresight for industry, which will in the end majorly influence investment decisions as well. Furthermore, this of course includes also government supports and incentive, but also a very important point, the removal of market distortions between renewable energy and green hydrogen and fossil fuels. This means at the moment it's not competitive, but for example, by introducing a carbon tax, there can be even created a balance of this price distortion in that sense. In the graphic on the right, you can see now a list of barriers along the value chain. I will not go into detail of each of the barriers, but I want to outline that there are several barriers for each step of the value chain to be considered. This ranges not only to electrolysis, but also to the renewable energy generation before that, infrastructure, industry, aviation, shipping, and even beyond that. However, if you might have a look after this presentation in more detail, you will probably see that for many stations of these of the value chain, you will find high cost and a lack of demand because it's less competitive at the moment as related to high costs. And this often again leads to bankability gaps, which are often also connected to the fact that there's a lacking off-taker at the moment, since we don't have price certainty or it's often very costly. Therefore, again, we have a lack of investment. So this all is clustered together, and considering that, it's important to have policy options that provide loans and financing scheme, but also, as mentioned before, introduce binding targets, which also gives a certain direction for industry, investors, and so on. As mentioned, it's not only about policy, it's also about regulatory framework. For example, you have to consider what kind of hydrogen supply models you are aiming at. There's a decision if you want a co-location of electrolyzers or if you would like to have decentralized models. If you look into the power sector regulations, you have to consider electricity balancing market mechanism, wheeling framework and charges, licensing and permitting processes. Coming to the gas sector regulation, it's about ownership unbundling, pipeline usage charges, safety and security. But not to forget the sustainability dimension. There have to be requirements how green hydrogen is actually produced. As Mike already described earlier, it's about the source of input electricity, greenhouse gas intensity, water and land use, and environmental and social aspects. You can see these are quite a number of layers and aspects that need to be considered to create a holistic framework. As just mentioned, especially sustainability targets or standards have to be considered. And since the topic of just energy transition is in focus, it's important to look beyond the classical value chain, which you just saw in my policy intervention overview, basically. if you consider a hydrogen economy, you need to know that there can be land conflicts. These can, for example, result from large-scale renewable energy projects. In some countries, water scarcity is a big issue. As shown in the introduction, green hydrogen requires water for the production, the electrolysis process, and therefore sustainable water management strategies are required. Sometimes even desalination plants have to be installed. What also shall be avoided is competition for electricity. It shall not be the case that you compete for electricity, which is required for direct electrification of cities and villages, to produce green hydrogen. And therefore, it would be even an opportunity to use the creation of additional renewable energy capacities to accelerate the access to electricity and overcome energy poverty. Meaning, if I set up a new electrolyzer plant and a power asset, I can maybe oversize it and transport that additional electricity to surrounding villages and cities. One very important aspect to consider are actually job losses. It's not only that a lot of new workforce is demanded for the sector and required, it's also that other jobs might get lost, especially in fossil industries. Therefore, it's important to ensure that you have comprehensive and upskilling initiatives which contribute to a sustainable creation of jobs. You can see this is already quite a number of factors, but of course, there's much more to it. And therefore, it's important to introduce strong socio-economic criteria and do a constant monitoring of socio-economic developments to see where interaction is required. As we just said, strong socio-economic criteria is required. But how can we actually ensure this is really followed in the process? And this is where certification comes in place. With certification and guarantees of origin, you can demonstrate compliance with a certain criteria set in a regulatory framework. There are several certification mechanisms and standards developed around the world. For example, in Australia, we have the Australian Zero Carbon Certification Scheme. In California, it's the Californian Low Carbon Fuel Standard. In Japan, it's another certification scheme. In the EU, we have standards which are defined in the EU Renewable Energy Directive 2, the so-called RED. And you can see there's a number of standards which are around the world, all considering these sustainability aspects, which are crucial for the uptake of a hydrogen economy. In the following, I would like to shed a glimpse on the EU standards which have been developed. As mentioned, the Renewable Energy Directive 2 proposes certain policy measures, and within a number of so-called delegated acts, rules for the production of renewable liquid and gaseous transport fuels of non-biological origin are set. This might sound a bit complex, but I will try to break it down in 2 steps. First, what are the key principles in these so-called delegated acts I was mentioning? The delegated acts formulate a methodology how to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions which are occurring during the supply chain. For that, a certain well-to-wheel methodology is followed. This means we are looking from the point of electricity generation to transport, hydrogen generation, transport and distribution again, up to the end use. So this whole life cycle basically has to be taken into consideration, and the emissions during this production process have to be calculated. The sum in the end shall not exceed 28.2 grams CO2 per megajoule. This will imply a reduction of 70% in comparison to fossil fuels. If you look at other standards, you can see here on the left, they sometimes do not only consider well to gate. So this does not have a harmonized standard yet, but you really have to also consider what are my export markets and which standards do I have to follow. This will majorly influence the business case in the future. Apart from the greenhouse gases embedded, there are other key principles like additionality. This means green hydrogen production should add to the deployment of renewable energy. Mike has also mentioned it several times. It's about setting up additional capacities and not having conflicting uses with existing ones. Temporal correlation shall ensure that green hydrogen is produced when renewable electricity is available, while geographic correlation is a principle that shall prevent grid congestion between the place where the renewable electricity is produced and where the green hydrogen is produced. To break it down one layer lower, I would like to give you two concrete examples. One would be if I set up my renewable power asset and I have a direct connection to the electrolyzer, it shall not be more than 36 months old. The electricity consumed shall be at the hour the renewable power asset is producing, and renewable power asset is located at the site of the hydrogen production. This is probably the easiest case to ensure that you comply with these principles set out in the Delegated Act. Another option would be sourcing via the grid. If you're sourcing via the grid, you have to have power purchase agreements with unsubsidized renewable power assets. Again, it's in the same with direct connection. The renewable power asset should be less than 36 months old. There needs to be an hourly correlation between hydrogen production and renewable power generation, and it should be located in the same bidding zone. This means, for example, Germany is one bidding zone, while Sweden has several bidding zones. This is basically a unit which has to be considered in this context. As you can see probably from my previous slides, all that is not so quickly to be understood, and it poses quite a level of complexity. And since this is such a multi-layer topic, a well-prepared and strategic uptake is crucial to establish a successful hydrogen economy. And this is acknowledged by many countries around the world. As you can see, 35 countries here. I think this is from June 2023. Please excuse if I have missed out including some countries. Have already published their national hydrogen strategy, while many other countries are actually in the preparation stage. Why do we have strategies, or what's the importance of a strategy? And this is actually to not only update on the development of the sector and identify key challenges and opportunities, it's also about setting a vision for development. And after identifying the current status and the challenges associated to it, it's important to introduce these quantitative targets also, as mentioned in the policy section, where we said this can be a very important element to also direct the market. And having these targets, this closely also correlates with funding opportunities and bankability options. These also have to be or shall be identified in the context of strategy. So the overall takeaway is probably, or hopefully what you took away from this presentation, it's a very complex topic, ranging from many market-specific aspects, which touch on keeping market shares, keeping international market shares for future export markets, also considering the socio-economic dimension and all these policy, certification, and regulatory implications you have to consider. And all that can be basically addressed in strategy. Coming to GFA consultant, or to our round of experts, GFA is actually implementing many projects around the globe. What you can see here on the map is actually blue countries we are active in with energy projects in general, while the green countries are specific green hydrogen projects GFA is currently implementing. And these projects are mostly in the context of market preparatory measures, as just mentioned. As seen from the previous slide, there's a lot of complexity to that topic, and in different donor-funded projects we are currently implementing, we are trying to reduce this complexity, also giving market foresights with many national partners. And just to give you some examples, for example, in South Africa, there's, for example, a value chain analysis done by TeoNest. TeoNest is also in this round and open for questions in a bit. Our colleague Henrik is currently working in the market opportunities project, where they look at lighthouse projects, but also at social environmental impact assessments. For example, the development of a handbook can be very useful for an investor to set up his project. As mentioned, strategies is an important topic. This ranges from strategies for oil and gas and chemical industries, PTX regulations and standards in Jordan, Nigeria. There's quite a range of projects. And since we saw the importance of the topic, we thought it would be a great opportunity to invite our two experts who are working on the ground in projects at the moment, and also open the discussion and allow for a dialogue with first-hand knowledge. All right, this was it from me. Thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Leah and Micah, for the very insightful presentation and also the wealth of information that you provided. As you mentioned, this is a very complex topic and relatively new for Indonesia. So I'm sure all the information, starting from technical application as well as the developments around the world, and also considerations for Indonesia in terms of sector as well as policy considerations as we are developing our own green hydrogen roadmap. So that's all very insightful. Now we come to the question and answer session. I see here that there are 47 questions already and 3 already answered. So a lot of a lot of interest in the topic. I will pick a few questions in the beginning. I invite both the speakers, Michael, Leah, Henrik, and Theo, to respond as necessary. First of all, I will pick the first question from, let me see, from Bram Setiawan. The question is, with the process of electrolysis to convert water to hydrogen, do we have to use pure H2O? So the content must be pure H2O, or is it possible to also include other liquid content? And if so, then what are the options available? There's also a similar question from Muhammad Hasdi As-Siddiqui, who asked whether it is possible to use seawater as the source, because as you know, Indonesia is an archipelagic country, so we are surrounded by the sea. So maybe that first technical question before I move on to the other questions. Go ahead. I invite.
Thank you, Diane. Yeah, I will try to respond and then maybe hand over to TeoNest, who has more deep engineering knowledge and chemical knowledge than I. But first of all, yes, we need water. Because the process of electrolysis splits up the water in its components, H2, like hydrogen, and O, which is oxygen. So this is what the electrolyzer does. And for this, we need water. We need also pure water for most of the electrolyzers to function. But there is a lot of dynamics currently in the development of new methods for new electrolyzers. So some of them need to deal with more pure water, like even almost distilled water, like for example the PEM electrolyzers who have this precious metal membrane. They need very pure water, and then other electrolyzers don't need perfectly pure water, but rather drinking water, let's say. It depends very much on the electrolyzer, but yes, the water has to be in general pure. I don't know, Theo, if you want to add something.
No, you said it.
Okay.
You're muted, Theo, sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I said you said it all. It's just depends on the electrolyzer type. Like a PEM or PEM, because of the catalyst, if the water is not pure, it can the water can contaminate the catalyst, and then it degraded the electrolyzer. When they soak the solid oxide, you said it uses steam. So this one, the steam doesn't have too much contamination compared to the water. So it depends on the type of the electrolyzer. Theoretically, yes, it should be clean water, pure water.
Okay. Thank you, Micah and Theo. Semoga menjawab pertanyaannya ya tadi Bapak Bra. Oke. Baik, pertanyaan selanjutnya yaitu pertanyaan dari Mainadi Napoh. So the question is, what efforts can be done to reduce the capex, capital expenditure cost, that is still high for hydrogen, for green hydrogen development? Meanwhile, Indonesia geographically is an archipelagic country, which will affect from the perspective of the transportation cost of the green hydrogen and the distribution to remote areas across Indonesia. Perhaps you can provide some feedback on this or some thoughts on how to reduce this capex costs, or is it something that we expect to reduce naturally? Go ahead.
Yeah. Also, I will start, and then my colleagues can jump in. So there are three factors that determine the cost of green hydrogen mainly, which is the capex of the electrolyzer. So if we reduce this will already reduce considerably the price of green hydrogen. So it depends really on your project, which electrolyzer you would like to use. And also in a couple of years, due to economies of scale, the capex of the electrolyzers will drop considerably. The other important factor for the determining the price of green hydrogen is the renewable energy cost. So it depends very much on how much costs 1 kilowatt hour of renewable energy in your system, in your grid. I mean, the more renewable energy is produced, the lower the price will be, and it really depends also on the market mechanisms. And the third determining factor are the full load hours. So the more operating hours, I guess, Theo, right, the lower will be the price.
Okay.
So these are the factors. I don't know if there's anything to.
Yeah, that's correct. Also, as you said, the full load hours. What do you do? Some countries, in order to be competitive, they map the best sites for renewables, because the first key component is the cost of electricity. And in the country, if you are looking at the solar and wind, you don't have the same potential. So first of all, you could look at the national country resources, and then you pick the best areas where you have the more full load hours. Let's say maybe to make it full load hours is not. I don't know if everybody understands what it means, but let us call the resources. They are in the countries. The resources are not the same from the south to the north. So meaning that sometimes you have many hours of sun or more wind than the other areas. When you choose, I can give an example in one country where they asked us what to do in order to have the cheapest hydrogen in order to compete with the all the competitors around. One option was to map the renewable energy resources and to look at the highest potential, allocate them to renewables. And here you would produce very cheap hydrogen and also renewables, because the cost of renewables is the key. The second one, we said to reduce the capex, it depends on the project size. The small size, the capex reduces by the size of the project. If you are installing 1 megawatt and 1 gigawatts, it won't have the same capex. So that's one of the key for the size of the project to play a big role in reducing the capex.
And if you allow me maybe to add or complement, it ultimately depends on the overall configuration and what you aim to produce. Ultimately, you may not only be talking hydrogen, but you may talk derivative, meaning ammonia, methanol, whatever you require. And then, of course, all of this from a technology point of view would add to your capex. And this would also then change the setup in terms how you localize your renewables and how this whole setup looks like. If you would actually produce it for export rather, as a bunker fuel or as an export carrier, or whether you would use it for local use, for instance, in urea production or any other fertilizer production. And then if it comes to the prices, as Mike indicated, one can expect that electrolyzer costs will drop and decrease in the upcoming years. However, currently, one may actually even expect that prices are on a higher level because there are not that many electrolyzers on the market, whereas all of these countries that are currently looking into piloting or into project operations, they would be sort of in a rush pursuing electrolyzers.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comprehensive answers. I will now move to the next question. It's again a little bit of a technical question from Fian Romadona. As explained earlier, hydrogen has no smell, no color, and is easily flammable. How do we know if there is a leakage in the green hydrogen, and what tool can we use to detect this leakage? Thank you. And who would like to answer?
Yes, it's very good questions. And if you go, for example, here at the fueling station, hydrogen fueling station, there are many detectors, because as you said, any simple fire, any simple spike, it will the hydrogen will burn quickly. And that's one of the problems we have of using hydrogen in cement, because it burns quickly and finish quickly. But this is not the question. The question is that how do we know? So it's just installing detectors and also measurements, because if it's in a pipeline, you know that okay, you have measurements from at the different distances. You can see if there is any losses between the two points. But at the key infrastructure, like as I said, like the fueling station, blending, and the blending facilities, there are detectors to see if there is any hydrogen going into the atmosphere or into the air. But hydrogen is not you cannot avoid, for example, in the transport, because of hydrogen expanded during the transportation, you always have, for the moment, you have to open the valve, what it is called boil off gas. Because when you start at minus 253 degrees or 52, and then you travel from Indonesia to South Africa or USA, your tank will expand, and to protect your tank is just to open the valve in order to release a small quantity of hydrogen, so that you can keep the tank in the safety. So it will be, at least for the tanks, the liquid hydrogen, it's unavoidable. So the idea is to have a fuel cell so that you can use this boil of gas as to fuel the ship, but this is still under development.
Okay, thanks, Theo. Next question. It's a bit related to policy development. And this is very important for Indonesia as we are still developing ours. The question is from Lutfan Jihadi. There are two questions. What policies and incentives should Indonesia implement to encourage investment in green hydrogen infrastructure and technologies while phasing out reliance on fossil fuels? That's the first question. And the second question, is there a best way, in your opinion, for Indonesia to ensure equitable access to green hydrogen technologies and benefits across its diverse regions? Geographically, Indonesia is huge. I think it covers a large part of Europe if you put it on a map, including the remote and less developed areas. Thank you. Maybe Theo and Henrik can answer to this.
Yeah, maybe I start with the policy and incentives. The policy, first of all, as Leah presented. So the investors, they need the guidelines, what is planned, what is the required. As she said that there should be like the target, binding target for end users. And then we know that in the industry, maybe fertilizer, transport, they have to meet these requirements. So this one. And for the incentives, normally you would do the analysis. To provide incentives, you give general incentives. But if you want to know exactly which incentive do I have to do, you would do the competitiveness analysis, like comparing green and gray or black or whatever the name we give. And then, well, after analyzing this, you know that, okay, the price gap between green and gray is this. Now you start looking what should be the incentives, maybe carbon tax, to reduce the price gap. Maybe you give some land for free. Maybe you give a financial incentive. So there are many ways you can do it, but this depends on case by case, country by country, where you conduct an analysis and you say, this is what is there, this is the gap. So how can we cover this gap? Yeah, that will be my recommendation. Henrik, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, all what is necessary for usual business or good business environment, which is long-term safeguarded regulatory frameworks and policies in place, yeah, where you have a stable investment environment. I think this is one of the prerequisites. And then currently it is all about pilot projects. It is rather on a case-by-case level. Where investors, and we see this also in the various countries we are working in, investors are looking at it as a potential future investment, but all of them are still a bit hesitant because we are talking high prices. Most of these projects, we are currently discussing one here in South Africa, which is sort of an idealized project case where we are seeking to set up an ammonia production, and we are talking about 2.6 billion US dollars investment. And in order to leverage so much funding, you need to conclude consortia, and you need to draw in also development financial institutions. Maybe also governments would be giving guarantees, which is especially interesting for then local banks in order to invest either equity or debt. I think it's all a bit of the mixture, but as Theo said, if you have binding targets, if you have a clear way forward defined by the government, and then there's different impulses by certain other policies that would facilitate investment, this would certainly help. From a project investment point of view, the biggest issue or the biggest challenge is actually the off-taker. If you have a reliable offtake, and if you have a long-term offtake agreement for your product, this can make a good business case from an investment point of view. And then, of course, maybe a diversification of your product, which means local use, a portion of export, which gives it a good investment opportunity. But this is rather case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Theo and Henrik. Leah, did you want to add something? I saw you raise your hand earlier.
Yeah, Henrik was actually just pointing it out about the offtake agreements. This is often a huge issue which causes this bankability gap, which I was mentioning before. So we don't know actually what will be the price at which stage and who's the offtake and when is it competitive. So that is a big barrier for investors basically, to step into these projects. And there are interesting mechanisms also from Europe where there's a price balancing tried at the moment, for example, that the cheapest bidding producer sells to a certain mechanism or company at the moment, which is sold again to the highest bidding off-taker in a sense. So there are different mechanisms which can be considered in that regard, but I think Henrik framed it quite well already.
Great. Thanks. Just related to your point, Theo, about the role of the government in setting targets and making it clear on what the road ahead is. I was wondering whether you and Henrik perhaps could share your experiences or lessons learned on providing assistance to countries in terms of developing a national framework or a policy, policy framework for green hydrogen, whether there are any takeaways that you could share with Indonesia.
Maybe I start, Henrik, and you will add. Yes, we have supported many countries in developing the roadmap, strategies, and go to the value chain analysis, and also pre-feasibility studies and infrastructure analysis. So for the policy, the key, as we said, is that if I am an investor sitting maybe somewhere in Dubai or wherever, I will look first if there are targets in the countries, binding targets, regulations, so that if I come in, nothing will, my business will not be compromised because of changing regulation and targets. So this is one of the key existing of policy and regulations. And we have recommended such measures for different countries, and they have been taken and put into consideration in order to attract investors. Second, we looked at the whole value chain, hydrogen value chain, as Mike presented. We added also some other countries, they have another layer of mining and manufacturing, because what Mike presented, it was from renewables up to the end use. But some countries, they have also opportunities for mining and manufacturing of equipment. So what we look is just looking at each segment, from mining, from manufacturing, for renewable construction. And then at each segment, you look, what are the problems? What are the opportunities? And what are the business opportunities in each one? And you make so you see, there is market potential, there is business potential, but there are some weaknesses and threats you analyze for each segment, and you say, okay, if you wanted to be competitive, you have to do in renewables this, in the conversion, in infrastructure. For example, one of the problem is the lack of infrastructure. You can have, I think there was a question, you have hydrogen in one island, the production, but how do we transport it to the demand center, which may not be in the production side? And there are different ways. You can use transmission lines, you can use pipelines, you can use ships. It depends on case by case, and also existing infrastructure. All these in one global national economy, you analyze all of them and you come up with different options, what can be done what can maybe strengthen, what new infrastructure required, and what are the new regulations to put in place in order to make sure that the investors are happy to invest in the country. Another point was maybe just before I close is the skills. The skills is very important. You may have all resources, but if you do not have skills, that's why you are doing such project, which is very good to prepare people. Look, there will be the need of new skills. So there should be reskilling existing force, but there will be also new skills that will be required for the development of hydrogen. And another thing is the cooperation, because we need cooperation in order to develop quickly. Henrik touched upon something which we found in a project. Countries, they have the targets, they are ready, but the market, the electrolyzers, there is a competition of electrolyzers. So Indonesia needs electrolyzer, South Africa needs, Brazil needs electrolyzer. And this competition, we can only reduce it by cooperation. Yeah, cooperating with companies like I give you an example, one mining company cooperating with one electrolyzer company and also with the one IPP. All of them, if they make a consortium, then they can make a good deal to access hydrogen equipment at a cheap cost. I will stop from there.
Thanks a lot, Theo.
Maybe also to complement here, I think people must understand there's a lot of complexity in this topic of hydrogen. You're not only talking renewable energy, you are talking renewable energy, you are talking hydrogen production, and then you may talk also derivatives, whatever that may be. So you need the infrastructure in place. This has to be looked at against the potential business case, and it is all embedded, of course, in a political context. What we found is, and which would be one of my biggest or main recommendations, would be that you need a clear governance structure also. You need a leading entity in a country in order to ensure whatever the roadmap may be, that you have somebody that really leads the process and draws in all of the other entities, might be other line ministries, because you are touching on so many different topics that are usually under the umbrella of different ministries or agencies, institutions within a country. And what it needs is I think, a clear setup, a clear governance structure with one entity leading the process and then drawing in all of the others. Because you are touching on gas regulation. If there are existing pipelines you need to enhance, you are touching upon a renewable deployment, you are touching upon business development, you are touching upon so many different aspects. And I think this was one of the biggest takeaways. So wherever this is in place, it certainly helps to facilitate the way forward in terms of what would be a roadmap, what are the steps to address and when to address them, and who is in charge actually doing this.
Thanks, Henrik. Very important. And here we have a lot of the participants are from the Ministry of Energy. So this is good input also for the Indonesian government as we are developing our own national strategy. And I think there was a second question to Lutfan Jihadi's question, which is the second part was, is there a best way to ensure equitable access to green hydrogen technologies and benefits in a way that it would benefit people in diverse regions, including in remote and less developed areas? So maybe I guess that in terms of supply and demand, how do you ensure equitable access? And is that the right lens to see it? Maybe you can provide your perspectives.
This is a very good one, but tricky as well, because again, it very much depends on the case scenario. I think I would look at it from a bit of a deviating angle. There will be demand centers for whatever you would like to produce. whatever is necessary. So from my point of view, looking at Indonesia, I understand that Indonesia is amongst the 5 largest exporters of ammonia, for instance. So this would be certainly one of the industries where you would like to decarbonize this with green hydrogen. And then it rather depends where all of this industry is actually located. And when it comes to participation, I would rather see this in a framework of this just energy transition, where you are looking mainly at potentially new jobs and other jobs that might be lost due to the decrease of use in oil and gas. Because to the same time, to the same end, I understand that Indonesia is also exporting quite a lot of oil and gas, and within sort of the global discussion around climate targets and binding commitments, you may certainly experience a decline in exports. Yeah, if the whole world shifts from renewables, from fossil fuels to renewable energy and / green hydrogen, there might also be sort of a decline in export opportunities for fossil fuels in the medium or long term, at least. And I think these are the things that must be balanced. And this is a thing that must be looked at from a holistic point of view when you are talking about establishing a more hydrogen economy, I would say. I would rather look at it from a very holistic point of view. And this is actually part of embedding the whole strategy or roadmap that you may set up in the framework of the just energy transition, because from my point of view, it is certainly part of it. I don't know, Theo, others, if you want to come in here and complement or add.
Yeah, I see Leah. Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Maybe just a small addition to it. I mean, I would not only see it as a challenge, but also really as an opportunity, since you were mentioning these remote areas specifically. I had a look at a renewable energy potential map of Indonesia, and these are not the regions where most people are living. So sometimes this can even turn into an opportunity, because these might be regions where investments for renewable energy and hydrogen production might flow. So ultimately, even industry might move to these regions. For example, in the case of Africa, it's not that the biggest projects are going to the most developed areas always. No, it's often also a chance for industrialization, because it attracts these projects in areas which might not have been in the center of attention before. So I would rather also see it as an opportunity, and if it's like done smartly, after many considerations, of course, this, shall not be underestimated.
Thanks, Leah. Okay, the next question from Silvania Marcelina Suhartono. What do you think about the challenges that might arise from the competition between green hydrogen and other low carbon technologies, such as batteries and carbon capture?
Yeah, maybe I can start with this one. So when we talk about different technologies, I would like to stress that actually they should not compete, but rather complement each other and coexist. So, for example, for the different storage types, we have hydrogen as gas storage. And this is for large, long-term and large-scale storage. So when the power generation exceeds the load, then we can have this surplus energy to produce hydrogen and store it, and then afterwards use it as electricity again with a fuel cell and feed it into the grid. And when we talk about, for example, batteries, like the lithium-ion batteries, these are for small applications. They are for mobility applications. So they really complement each other. So one is rather for the mobility sector, and the other one is for the power sector. And when it comes to carbon capture and storage, this is also something that goes hand in hand with green hydrogen. So because we need it to produce e-fuels, for example. So it's something that really complements each other rather than to be competing technologies. We all need them for a decarbonized economy.
Right. Thanks, Micah.
Yeah.
Any other input?
Maybe Maybe I can add something. I'm actually finalizing an analysis in one country for competitive analysis where we are looking at green compared to its fossil fuel alternative and non-fossil fuel, like renewable alternatives, like competing with batteries, electricity, as you said, Mike, biofuels, and CCS. So everything depends on what you want to do and what is your market. So if the market allows you CCS, you can compare what is, because CCS, carbon capture and storage, is also part of the equation, is one of the parameters for the decarbonization. It's not just green and the other thing, forget about it. Each application has its own limits and depending on the legislation. There are countries who do not accept carbon capture and storage. There are countries who would like it, but they do not have a storage. So the map of where you have, for example, the caverns where we can store is not everywhere. So everything depends on available possibilities. But the competition, batteries, electricity, it will be good if we can use hydrogen, electricity directly, renewables. Then we do not have all these round trip efficiency. We have renewables, direct use, that's perfect. But as Mike said at the beginning, hydrogen is used as energy carrier, is used as feedstock, is used as fuel. So for feedstock, you don't have any other choice. You have to produce hydrogen. And for other application where you would say competing, it will depend on case by case. If you have a biomass, then it's better to use biomass. I remember when we were analyzing kerosene, there was a case of kerosene from biofuel and from green hydrogen and dark. So it depends case by case, but what we saw from the analysis we are completing now by next week is that there is a complementarity. Batteries you cannot use in aviations, you cannot use them in shipping, you cannot use at long transportation. So that will be a lot of more complementarity than competition.
Thanks, Theo. Yeah, I think it's very interesting the fact that you all pointed out very well that the application of green hydrogen is not competitive for all sectors, and so there are certain sectors that are where it makes more sense economically and so on, and it shouldn't actually compete with the other renewable energy sources or options that may be appropriate for other sectors. And I think again, coming back to your point earlier, that the feasibility study, the analysis, the country analysis is very important in order to determine the optimal mix of renewable energy as we strive for full decarbonization by 2060. We have two more, I think we have time for two more questions. So let me pick one from the private sector, from Yusuf Gunawan. I'm from the steel industry, and I have a question related to downstreaming of hydrogen. So the steel production process is very high, has very high CO2 potential to be captured and to become a raw material to be used as methanol, together with green hydrogen. According to you, merging or combination of green hydrogen and carbon capture for methanol production, would that be a profitable product? Is that clear enough, the question?
I think so. So my understanding is that he's talking about, yes, you can use CO2 from steel industry and use it with hydrogen to produce other fuels.
Yeah,
that's correct. Maybe Henrique will talk more than me because you are working on this project. We have a project where the steel industry is cooperating with the other industry that produce fuels, so that you can take the CO2 from steel and then you use it to produce kerosene. Actually, that's one of the projects we're analyzing. So it's possible because it depends on the regulation, as I said. So far, CO2 from unavoidable CO2, you can use it for the production of e-fuels like the hydrocarbons. So yes, is true, and some in countries where it's possible, industries are making consortium so that they can build everything together. Then you get output CO2 from the industry to the production of e-fuels. And that is an opportunity for the steel industry. You have already a product which you can either use hydrogen to decarbonize or defossilize your steel, and also the CO2 coming from the process can be fed into the e-fuel production.
Thanks, Theo. Hendrik, any further input?
Yeah, nothing to add really, but if this of course ultimately becomes a business case for you, depends very much on the circumstances, on the volumes you are handling, and on the local environment in that sense. But technically, as Theo pointed out, it's of course feasible.
Thank you. Another question from Andi Ramdhani. Has there been any studies that measures the carbon emission from the production and maintenance of the infrastructure required to produce a green hydrogen? For example, the electrolyzer, the storage, the transportation of green hydrogen. Has there been a study to compare the life cycle of the carbon emissions from green hydrogen compared to others renewable energy or energy sources? I think this is similar to the study you're doing, Theo, maybe?
I mean,
Maybe Henrik,
I can,
you can.
Yeah, if I can come in here, I can only say that what we are currently doing here in South Africa is as part of one project example that we are configuring, which would be an ammonia production here in South Africa, based close to a port site, where we would be looking at export. We are currently also carrying out a life cycle assessment from well to gate, which means that up to the point where we would be exporting or using it as a shipping fuel, the ammonia, we are currently looking into the life cycle, which is mainly focused on the emission, of course. Once this is done by beginning of next year, this would also be publicly available. But this, of course, looks into the case of this specific scenario that we have developed here for South Africa in the framework of the project. Theo, you may come in if you have other additional ideas on reports or knowledge.
Leah presented one slide. Maybe Leah goes first. Leah, there was a slide explaining all these processes and how they count the CO2.
I mean, for example, in the EU certification, there's a specific methodology how to calculate actually these emissions. Important here is it only starts basically from the electrolysis. It's not the production process of the electrolyzer, for example, which is included. And for electrolyzers, you have different emissions that potentially can vary high if you look at the material they're consisting of. Especially in case of the PEM electrolyzer, you have very emission-intensive materials like iridium, which are basically within the electrolyzer and also required there. So there are different emission levels, but apart from that, like you basically have to consider for each step of the value chain what emissions are associated to that. And I think there you will find different values. I'm actually not sure if there are specific values which you can refer to from regulative documents. Theo, you know if there already established. Like in the case of biofuels, you have specific values which you can always add as dummy value for certain aspects of the value chain, for example.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers now, but after the meeting later, Diane, I can share some numbers. We do have numbers on renewables. What will be the greenhouse gas embedded into 1 kilowatt hour of electricity produced from different aspects. So once you have this, then you would add the electrolyzer chain, sub-chain, and then, but we don't have very elaborated study. As Henrik said, we started now. In his team, they are developing a life cycle assessment. So that will be one of the information we will have. For electricity, yes, we can provide.
Most of the countries are currently looking into this in view of the potential certification of hydrogen. Yeah, that's got to do a lot with export markets. Lea touched upon it, carbon border mechanism, and also on some financing schemes that have specific requirements also. And that in a way, in the medium term, will associate with a certification scheme. There is, I think, a publication by the International Partnership for Hydrogen in Fuel Cells in the Economy. I think they have worked out a methodology of the assessment, which is quite comprehensive and which is globally seen as one of the leading examples in that view.
Right. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, if you have any of the studies that you can share with us after the webinar, I'm sure that all the participants would be very happy to receive it. So I think we've come to the end of our Q&A session. Thank you so much to all of you, Micah, Lea, Theo, and Henrik, for the wealth of information and the technical expertise and sharing that you have provided for all of us, for all the participants. I hope that this will provide very good takeaways for all the participants in terms of just increasing our awareness about this very complex topic, but also providing useful input for our government officials who are present on this day for the for considerations on developing the national roadmap for green hydrogen. So thanks again from my side, and I hand over the floor back to the MC. Silakan, Mbak Endah. A round of applause for our participants. And all our speakers.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Dian. Terima kasih juga kepada para narasumber yang sudah membagikan ilmunya, tentu sangat bermanfaat bagi kami di Indonesia dan terkait dengan green hydrogen. Baiklah. Ini mungkin juga ada sesi yang sedang dinantikan oleh para peserta, Bu Dian. Tadi sudah ada tanya jawab yang sangat menarik. Apakah sudah terpilih siapa kira-kira penanya, 3 penanya terbaik? Boleh diumumkan, nanti juga mungkin boleh dibantu untuk ditulis di kolom chat. Nah, sudah ada Bu Dian?
Sudah ada. Ini saya dibantu dengan tim ya untuk memilih 3 penanya terbaik. 3 penanya terbaik. Ini nanti urutannya 1, 2, 3 nanti mungkin akan diinfokan langsung ya. Cuma 3 pertanyaan terbaiknya dari Vian Romadona tentang kebocoran hydrogen, Lutfan Jihadi tentang akses green hydrogen ke daerah-daerah terpencil, dan dari Maynardi Napah tentang capex reduction. Jadi 3 itu ya nanti pemenangnya.
Baik, luar biasa. Untuk urutannya nomor 1 sampai 3 boleh bisa dibantu oleh Mbak Jessica, mungkin nanti ditulis di kolom chat.
Ya, thank you Mbak.
Baik. Sama-sama. Nah, untuk selanjutnya ada pengumuman untuk review postingan Instagram terbaik nih. Jadi selain di Zoom dan di YouTube juga ramai juga nih di sosial media kami. Ada 5 orang. Yang pertama @25plccc, kemudian yang kedua Cornelia Waren, yang ketiga Ahmadi Chandra, yang keempat Ramdania.ram, yang kelima adalah Potret Makna. Baik, kami sebutkan di kolom chat. Demikian. Baik, sudah bisa dilihat.
Mbak Enda izin sebelum tutup
Bagaimana?
kita foto bersama ya.
Oh ya,
dengan
betul.
para panelis.
Foto. Baik, sebelum kita tutup, boleh kita foto bersama dulu dengan para panelis. Baik, saya hitung. 1. Oh, baik. Pak Asep, boleh dibuka? Baik, 1, 2, 3. Sekali lagi, boleh? 1, 2, 3. Baik, terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Baiklah, Sobat Energi, demikian webinar PPSDM KBTK kali ini tanggal 20 September 2023. Terima kasih kepada para pejabat, para pimpinan Kementerian SDM yang telah hadir, kepada Pak Direktur yang dari awal sampai akhir juga ikut menyaksikan webinar kali ini. Para narasumber serta kepada dan kepada Budian sebagai moderator serta kepada GFA Consulting Group yang sudah berpartisipasi dalam webinar kali ini. Kepada peserta webinar, Sobat Energi juga terima kasih telah hadir dan memeriahkan webinar kali ini. Izinkan saya membacakan pantun sebelum menutup. Ke Jakarta kerja jadi teknisi, makan kue sambusa khas Kota Mamuju. Ayo penuhi kebutuhan energi bersih menuju Indonesia maju. Baik, mohon dimaafkan apabila kami ada kekurangan dalam penyelenggaraan. Nantikan webinar PPSDM KBTK selanjutnya. Dan sekian dan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sampai jumpa. Nah, ini sebelum berakhir kami akan share link evaluasi. Nanti bisa diisi untuk para peserta. Nah, setelah mengisi link evaluasi akan baru ada muncul sertifikatnya. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it. Theo and Henrik.
You.
Good discussion.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Would
kemudian perawatan PLTS dan PLTMA, dan ada juga kontrol terkait SCADA.
Nah, jadi teman-teman gak usah ragu lagi untuk join bersama kami di program study ini, karena tentunya proses kita sangat bagus sekali ya guys ya.
Iya, benar banget Kopi.
Yuk belajar. Energi terbarukan.
tidak hanya melakukan teori, tapi ada juga praktek, dan praktek yang kita telah lakukan di sini adalah terkait perencanaan PLTS dan PLTMH, kemudian perawatan PLTS dan PLTMH, dan ada juga kontrol terkait skadar.
Nah, jadi teman-teman gak usah ragu lagi untuk join bersama kami di program studi ini, karena tentunya proses kita sangat bagus sekali ya guys ya.
Iya, benar banget Kopi.
Yuk belajar. Energi terbarukan.
kemudian perawatan PLTS dan PLTMH, dan ada juga kontrol terkait skadar.
Nah, jadi teman-teman gak usah ragu lagi untuk join bersama kami di program studi ini, karena tentunya proses kita sangat bagus sekali ya guys ya.
Iya, benar banget Kopi.
Yuk belajar. Energi terbarukan.
Dunia terus berubah dan juga beriringan dengan semua kebutuhan di dalamnya. Di dalam kehidupan manusia sehari-hari, sumber energi menjadikan hal yang utama bagi keberlangsungan hidup manusia hingga diperlukannya sumber energi terbarukan. PPSDM KEBTKE hadir untuk memenuhi semua tantangan-tantangan yang ada di masa sekarang ini. Di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan, serta konservasinya agar bidang KEBTKE dapat dikelola secara baik. Mengelola sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan menjadi fokus utama bagi PPSDM KEBTKE untuk menjadikannya SDM yang berkompeten, profesional, berdaya saing, dan juga bermoral dalam lingkungan global di bidang ketenagalistrikan atau energi baru terbarukan dan konservasi energi. Dengan program-program unggulan yang diterapkan PPSDM KEBTKE dan juga didukung oleh para pegawai yang profesional dan berdedikasi tinggi. Demi melengkapi kesempurnaan pembentukan sumber daya manusia di bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru dan terbarukan. demi menciptakan dan membentuk SDM yang kompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi. PPSDM KEBTKE memfasilitasi seluruh peserta didik dengan sarana dan prasarana yang sudah memiliki standar ISO. Laboratorium dan workshop menjadi fokus sarana dan prasarana di wilayah Pusdikat KEBTKE.
PPSDM KEBTKE, Kementerian Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral, telah bertransformasi menjadi sebuah lembaga pengembangan SDM di bidang ketenagalistrikan dan EBTKE yang unggul dan selalu menjaga kualitas layanannya. PPSDM KEBTKE mendukung target nasional Net Zero Emission 2060 melalui transisi energi yang harus diwujudkan oleh semua pihak untuk mengurangi dampak perubahan iklim bagi kehidupan masyarakat. Selain itu, Indonesia memiliki energi baru terbarukan dengan potensi yang tinggi, mulai dari matahari, hidro atau air, angin, bioenergi, panas bumi, serta lautan. Hal inilah yang membuat kami semakin matang dan siap melayani Anda. Kami didukung oleh para fasilitator yang berkompeten dan fasilitas yang lengkap sesuai dengan kebutuhan pelatihan, sertifikasi, bimbingan teknis, dan layanan penunjang lainnya. Pelatihan dan sertifikasi dilaksanakan dengan layanan yang prima. Bergabunglah bersama PPSDM KEBTKE.
Program diklat di dalamnya dibagi menjadi 4 kelompok besar, yaitu bidang ketenagalistrikan, energi baru terbarukan, konservasi energi, serta manajemen. Bidang ketenagalistrikan terdapat beberapa diklat unggulan yang mencakup diklat teknis inspektur ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perencanaan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis perizinan ketenagalistrikan, diklat teknis uji layak instalasi listrik, diklat teknis perhitungan tarif listrik, diklat teknis pengembangan listrik perdesaan, diklat teknis pengelolaan dan pemantauan lingkungan bidang ketenagalistrikan, dan diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTMH. Di bidang energi baru terbarukan, dikembangkan beberapa diklat teknis, di antaranya diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTS, diklat teknis pengelolaan PLTB, diklat teknis pengelolaan biogas, serta diklat teknis lelang wilayah kerja pertambangan panas bumi. Sementara untuk bidang konservasi energi, diliputi diklat teknis kiat-kiat konservasi energi, diklat teknis audit energi, diklat teknis manajer energi, diklat teknis penghematan energi dan air, diklat teknis adaptasi dan mitigasi gas rumah kaca, dan diklat teknis perencanaan energi. Dengan itu semua, saat ini PPSDM KEBTKE mempersiapkan sebuah wilayah yang akan dijadikan sebuah kampus besar diklat tersendiri di daerah Cisarua, Jawa Barat, yang akan didirikannya sebuah fasilitas lengkap untuk memenuhi kebutuhan para pengajar dan peserta didik. Kampus Desa Kuta dan Kampus Desa Cisarua merupakan sebuah bentuk keseriusan PPSDM KEBTKE untuk terus menciptakan sumber daya manusia yang berkompeten, profesional, dan berdaya saing tinggi di setiap bidangnya.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hari ini saya mengunjungi beberapa fasilitas PPSDM, khususnya yang ada di Satker PPSDM KEBTKE yang berada di Cisarua dan di Megamendung. Kita melihat nih di belakang kita, ini beberapa fasilitas yang harusnya nanti muncul di sini beberapa pelatihan-pelatihan yang kita bisa manfaatkan berdasarkan lokasi yang ada di sekitar sini. Jadi kita berharap kita semuanya bisa memanfaatkan, terutama terkait dengan pelayanan untuk masyarakat. Saya sangat mendukung pengembangan PPSDM KE-BTKE untuk memanfaatkan aset-aset yang ada guna perkembangan institusi ini supaya lebih maju lagi ke depannya. Terima kasih. Jaya selalu PPSDM KE-BTKE.
Pengembangan sumber daya manusia adalah proses pelatihan pengetahuan dan sertifikasi sumber daya manusia. Maka dari itu, PPSDM KE-BTKE hadir dalam sebuah lembaga yang memfasilitasi sumber daya manusia yang baru. Kami siap menciptakan sumber daya manusia yang cepat, cermat, dan produktif.